Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As always, it is my honor to have our guests here because I know that they're coming with a couple of things that are very precious. One, their time. And I thank you so much, Doc, for coming and sharing and spending this rich commodity with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. The second is your journey. And I want to thank you that you are coming to entrust us with such valuable insight in your life and who you are and how you overcame and become the man that you are today. Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate being a guest today.
You there, Doc?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, you're welcome, man. Yeah, I can. Tell the people about your creatives, what you are. I know you have done much. I know your field of study that you are in. And from that space, you are creating wonderful vision and you're leading folks. Tell them a little about who you are from that point of view, and then we'll escort you back to your childhood.
Sure. I help people reduce weight without going on a diet so that they can do it in a healthy manner and keep it off. And they don't need to order any special products or meals. They don't need to exercise and they don't need to count calories. And my journey started basically in July of 2016 when my doctor told me, based on being overweight and my lab results, I had a 95% chance for a fatal heart attack. So my doctor gave me two options. He said, lose weight or find a new doctor. Wow. And he strongly encouraged me to find a new doctor because he'd been after me for 8 years to lose the weight, and I hadn't done anything up until that point.
Wow.
And so during the next 4 months,
I can't wait to
50 pounds. Yeah.
Wow. We got to get into that because I want to know what's your secret, number one, and the agreements that you made after he said that to you. Doc, I tell people that life is a series of agreements that we make to ourselves. And based on whatever that agreement that we make, we will then take the corresponding actions to make it come to pass. And you did. He said some words to you, and I want to get back to that story later because that's going to house some powerful stuff, and I want my audience to get to know it. I want to get to know it. I want to go back, Doc, and talk to you about your childhood. What was your family unit like? How was your first area of life in the sense with your parents, siblings, that type of thing?
Well, most people don't know I'm a twin, and my twin brother passed away at age 19, and I have a younger sister, 3 years younger. Wow. My parents, stayed married their entire, my mom's still alive, but they stayed married, and I was very blessed and fortunate to have great parents. So we grew up in, lower middle class families, and mm-hmm. we're blessed to have, plenty of food and shelter and good schools. And that was my childhood. Played a lot of sports and was always active.
And how did you, as far as the activity, I know sports, I love sports. I grew up in sports as well. And I tell people there's a thing about athletes that is done even though people may not know it, but the athlete knows it in the sense that we learn the value of the mind over pushing the body beyond its limits when we are athletes and we get a chance to enter that world, but we're just looking at it from that aspect. But later on in life, we see that principle that we learn within as an athlete is valuable when it comes to facing situations that arise and so forth. Talk to me, Doc, as to how you based on the family unit and the fact that you guys are growing well and going forth. What was how were you looking out and perceiving the world based on how your family was? How were you interacting with friends and others in your space?
Well, I was fortunate and blessed that I had a lot of friends when I was younger in elementary school and high school. High school wasn't so good. However, I played a lot of sports and worked during high school and went to college. And again, having a twin brother, I always had a companion to throw a baseball with or play catch with a football. So I was very fortunate in that respect. And one thing I learned when I was in college is because I was, very active physically, I was able to eat a lot of what I call junk food, M&Ms and pizza and ice cream, and never gained any weight. However, once I got out of college and life gets in the way with family obligations and work obligations, and all of a sudden I'm not exercising as much, and I started eating food that wasn't so healthy for me, and the weight crept up on me. And if you only gain 5 pounds a year after 10 years, that's 50 pounds. And that's what happens with
Yeah.
most people. And I was the typical person that happened to.
Yeah, I
The other
think
thing I learned is that,
go ahead.
the other thing I learned is that no matter what you do, you can never out exercise poor eating habits. So your eating habits are more important sometimes than the physical activity and the exercises that people do, especially for pro athletes. A lot of them nowadays have more knowledge of how to take care of their bodies with what they put into it, as well as the training they do.
Yeah, yeah. You had mentioned earlier in the onset of the interview that you mentioned that you are a twin and your brother died when you were about 19.
Correct.
How did that trauma, how did the family unit handle that trauma, number one, and how did it affect you as an individual?
For me, I had not seen my brother for only once during the last year that he was alive, because he was going to the University of Pennsylvania and I was at the University of South Florida. And he died on July 14th, 1974. And I was working at Disney World actually when I got the phone call from my dad. So for me, the trauma didn't hit for about 5 years. And then it's finally hit me because I was too busy with life and carrying on and taking care of things. My parents, it devastated them. My younger sister impacted her. It hit her pretty hard. However, with most tragedies, life goes on, and that's what happened. We just continued moving forward.
Yeah, I remember with when my mom died, she being my best friend, I kept busy. I didn't grieve, as they say, or I didn't allow myself a grieving period because I knew that if I stayed busy, I would probably be able to manage it, I guess is how I perceived it. And I didn't until several years later when I was put into a situation where that memory came back and I realized that I hadn't dealt with this. I didn't allow myself to go through that process. And it's amazing, Don, how things has a way of coming back to have that visitation that we try to suppress our emotions and feelings and all of these things, but it takes a lot of force to suppress those things, and we can't keep busy forever, because one day when we are quiet doing something, then all those thoughts come into play, and then here we are dealing with this onset of emotions that we were trying to not to pay attention to. Talk to me about, you said that later on it showed up. Talk to me as to what your recollection as to what that was and how did it manifest.
Well, after my brother passed away, when I got back to school, found out that my roommate, his fiance, was also killed in a camping accident. And then one of my fraternity brothers, a couple months later, his entire family was killed in a car accident. So he lost not only his mother, father, but his brother and sister. So that was very tragic for him. And it puts things in perspective as to what your loss is personally. It was about 5 years later when I was out of college that, like you said, I was in a quiet spot and everything just came back to me, all the emotions, and realized that, I wasn't going to be able to talk to him and he was gone. And so I had to deal with that. And I went for help with a psychologist and got through it. And sometimes, we need the professional help to deal with our grief and what we go through.
I absolutely agree. We have culture. We have certain cultures that look at that as a taboo topic to seek help. That's amazing to me. How we put these barriers to prevent us from healing, and through whatever culture or belief system that we have enacted through the traditions of the fathers, as they say, that causes us much harm. And as I mentioned in the onset of this thing, we know that that model, living from the outside in, is not the correct model, and it hasn't worked because we know how much we're looking at the pain around our world. We're looking at young men doing treacherous things and out of living from the outside, So, talk to me as to you're in college. How did you get into the space that you're in as far as your profession? How did you get there? What was the process, and why did you do what you did?
Well, I was always very active in sports, as I mentioned. And when I got out of college, I was
Mm-hmm.
traveling as an auditor to different cities each week. And while traveling, I was reading a book called Sugar Blues by William Duffy. It came out in the 1970s. And I realized how dangerous and toxic sugar is. So for about 10 years, I stopped eating refined sugar completely. I was not a vegetarian. I just didn't eat red meat. However, I did eat fish and chicken, and then was always,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of myself. And as I mentioned earlier, life gets in the way with, family obligations. I had a child, I was married, had work obligations, and
Yeah.
started eating, M&Ms again and make an exception. As a former boss told me, he says, be careful of making exceptions because they tend to become the rule. And so the way crept up on me. And again, I went back to school for law school, and I became an attorney and a lawyer, and
Mm-hmm.
practiced divorce work, which is very, very stressful here in the States. And um, one thing I learned after I stopped practicing law was I needed to start taking care of myself. And like most people, I procrastinated on starting to eat healthier. I don't like to use
Yeah.
the word diet because diet has a negative connotation. Diets tend to be temporary, extreme, hard to stick with, and a lot of them are potentially dangerous. So I changed my lifestyle back to eating healthy again. And the weight came off, and I've kept it off for over 6 years now. And that's the difference is I have a lot of friends that have lost weight, significant amounts. However, within a year, they've gained most of it back. Some have gained even more because they didn't change their lifestyles. So I look at eating healthy as running a marathon, except in this marathon,
Yeah.
there's no finish line, whereas a diet is a sprint and it has a finish line.
Yeah.
And most people, when they reach a goal, then they revert back to their old eating habit. And
Yeah.
that's where I want to attempt to teach people is it's a lifestyle. It's a way
Yeah.
that you enjoy your life, yet eat healthy.
Yeah, I want you to talk about that, because one of the things that I tell people about personal development, and when you say that terminology, to me, personal development and all of these things or program is threads of enlightenment. Enlightenment to me means is when you and I become a better student of ourselves. As we began to investigate and learn of who we are as the inner person, we are then we began to shed away those programmings that we received about the less than, about who we are as individuals. And I know I have been there, Doc. We all were athletes and cut. And I tell my granddaughter, she shows me these guys, and I said, "Yeah, Papa used to look like that," and she's like, "Yeah, sure, Papa." So we know that it was a certain mentality, and then we dropped that. Talk to me, because you had to. Here's this doctor comes to you. You married. You're in the field. I know about divorce. I have a friend of mine. I was actually going through a divorce, and I was there sitting in court. And this guy comes to me. He's sitting right next to me. He's in a suit. I'm in a suit. And he looks at me and he says, "Divorce is not for poor people." And I looked at him and I said, he said, "The system wasn't designed for poor people. It was designed for rich." And I remember him looking at me and said that. And when I got in front of the judge, I understood what he was talking about. So it's a battleground that is amazing, that what happens there. And I could see where the stress of that battleground, where it can affect an individual, as you were saying, and it translated into your eating habits. How did you, because I know stress and we talk about stress, how did you begin to, what was your journey, Doc? Once you identify, your doctor said he's been trying to get you for years to lose weight and all this type of stuff. What happened after that conversation that triggered you? Because now you have to learn about not learn, not reactivate your belief system and your eating habits, reprogramming yourself. How did you realize that, and what was the process by which you began doing the changes?
Well, the light bulb, I didn't told you the
Yeah,
95% chance for a fatal heart attack. It opened my
yeah,
eyes. So asked, well, what do you have to help me lose weight? And at that time, they had something called HCG, which is a hormone from pregnant women. And what it does, it tricks the body
yeah.
into burning fat
Mm-hmm.
instead of muscle. And you're on 550 calories a day for 6 weeks. So I lost the weight that way. However, you need to recreate how you eat. And that was the difference. I had 6 friends that lost a lot of weight the same way. And as I mentioned earlier, they all gained their weight back. However, I didn't. What I
Yeah,
did is I went back and started reading the books that I had from the 1970s by Paul and Patricia Bragg, Sugar Blues by William Duffy, books by Jack LaLanne, Richard Simmons. And then I started reading the books that were written by current authors. And what I realized is the current authors were promoting their own products and services and programs. And when you read their book, it made it seem like
mm-hmm.
if you didn't purchase their service or their products, you would fail. Yet the people back in the
Yeah,
70s, they were promoting basic eating habits, things we all know what to do. We
yeah,
just don't do it. And so I read a lot of books, and as a lawyer, I'm trained to sift through facts, opinion, and things that are fiction. And I started realizing that today there's a lot of dishonesty in the food industry and also in the weight loss industry. And so I want to educate people as to things that they can do that are very simple. For example, in the United States, 72% of the people are overweight. Well, there's a direct correlation to not drinking enough water because 75%
mm-hmm.
of the US population is chronically dehydrated. Our bodies are 60 to 70% water, not soda or diet soda or fruit juices or fruit flavored beverages. Also,
Yeah,
a lot of times when we think we're hungry, we're actually thirsty. So we need to drink more pure
mm-hmm.
water. And that's something everybody can do, and it's very inexpensive. The other thing is to avoid the processed foods and the manufactured foods. Manufactured foods are made in a laboratory by people in a white lab coat. It's not made by nature. And so you
Yeah.
want to eat more of the holistic or real foods, the whole foods. And that's a big difference today.
I know
The
that.
other thing is
Go ahead.
the other thing
Go
is
ahead,
we
Don.
all are in a hurry, and so we tend to eat very fast. So I've learned to slow
Yeah,
down my eating habits and also eat smaller portions. What a lot of people don't realize is our portions have been supersized. In the 1900s, the average size dinner plate is 9 inches in diameter. Today, it's 12 inches. In restaurants, it's 13 to 15 inches. Yet in Europe, it's still 9 inches in diameter. So what I do is
mm,
I use a salad plate instead of a dinner size plate and just take what I would want to eat. And eating slowly makes me fuller, and so I don't eat a lot and gulp it down like I used to. So that's little things that people can do. It's not restricting them as to certain foods that they must eat. There's certain things you have to avoid, and that's the sodas and the diet sodas and the
yeah,
manufactured foods, the candy bars. I'm not a purist. I do enjoy a piece of chocolate cake every once in a while or a piece of pie. However, I take a smaller portion than what I used
yeah.
to, and I eat it a lot slower and enjoy it.
It's a mental, as I mentioned to you about the athlete aspect of it, it's the mental toughness that you have to do it. And you said it is not a sprint; it's a marathon. One of the things about Europe and even Asia, I know they chew. We don't chew our food in Western civilization because of our lifestyle. We kind of basically do some big one chew or two, and then we swallow the thing. And when you go to Europe and other parts of the world, the older folks, I like watching the older folks eat because they tend to eat slower and chew their food. And as you mentioned, when you do that, you become more full, and you're not in this. You take your time. It sits in your stomach. There's a whole process that takes place when you sit down and eat and spend your time eating. And again, I believe it's just that fast mentality that we are programmed to have. And I was in corporate America, and I've been working all day, and I realize, oh my God, it's lunchtime or I'm hungry and I got to run grab something to eat. I run over to the fast food place. I grab something, I eat the food, driving back to work in my car, drinking the soda or the juice or something, hitting back the desk. I mean, that's just a recipe of death. And we do that every day, every day, every day. And then before you know it, like you said, we have 50 pounds and we're depressed. We are spiraling into someplace different because of we haven't learned to institute just a few little habits, like you said, drinking more water, slowing down, and eating our food. If we do that alone, those two things, Doc, people would lose a good 5, 10 pounds just from those two alone. They would slow down and learn to eat. Talk to us about the mindset, because the mindset is what you have to overcome because they're programmed. And so, what are some of the things? Because I hear they always talk about these things. How do you hijack the mind? Because they're always on Pinterest. That my granddaughter shows me all these other places and they call it hijacking something. I'm like, wow, that's really nice. So, how do you? What are some of the tools that you utilize as you read and saw the reasons of the older writers, the purpose, they understood the purpose of it. The younger ones were more so about the monetary aspect of their product versus the older one. Tell us about some of those other principles. We talked about slowly eating, drinking more water. What were some of those other things that you saw as you read from the old school writers?
Well, a couple of the other things I learned was, as you mentioned, to focus on the food you're eating. A lot of times when we're at our desk working, especially in corporate America, we'll have a sandwich, and because we're working and not paying attention to our food, we'll look down and the sandwich is gone. It's like, well, where did it go? You didn't realize that you had
Mm-hmm.
already eaten the whole sandwich. Or
Yeah.
you grabbed, a handful of candy or a handful of nuts and it's gone. So I learned to slow down. What I do is I count out, 10 pieces of nuts, almonds or cashews or walnuts, and I make it a game of how slow I can eat them. And so if you're allergic
Yeah.
to nuts, you can eat, berries or cherries, and are very good for hand food, finger food. And the other thing with cherries, because they have pits, you have to eat them slowly so you don't, crack your teeth on one of the pits. The other thing is
Yeah.
80% of our thoughts are negative.
Yes.
Imagine if we changed our mindset to make 80% of our thoughts positive. So I teach people how to create positive thoughts from negative thoughts. So you're making a choice. You're not sacrificing or foregoing something. You're making a healthy choice. And there was a couple quotes that resonated with me. One is, we spend our wealth or spend our health chasing wealth, and then later we spend our wealth chasing health. So it's better to find a balance where you're not spending your health and chasing the wealth, and you can enjoy life later on. The other thing is by Heather Morgan. She says every time you eat or drink, you're either feeding disease or fighting it. And so
Wow.
again, I'm making choices. I'm consciously deciding. So I don't turn things to negative. I'm not sacrificing or foregoing. I'm choosing to eat healthy. I'm making healthy affirmations. The other thing is to get adequate sleep. What I learned in
Mm-hmm.
research is, to lose 1 pound, you need to reduce your caloric intake by 500 calories a day for 7 days. And most of us eat too many calories or too much food. The nutritional fact panels are based on 2,000 calories a day, yet most Americans consume an average of 3,600 calories a day, which is almost double than what you need. So
Wow.
sleep is very important. And what I tell people is, take the TV out of the bedroom, take the electronics out, because the electromagnetic interferes with our sleeping patterns. So you want to get at least 7 to 8 hours of high quality sleep, little things like that. Technology is wonderful. However, it impacts our health in ways that people don't realize. So adequate sleep. The other thing is, the national brands are always advertising lose 15, 20, 30 pounds of weight. You're guaranteed your first month. We didn't put our weight on overnight. So we're not going to take
Mm-hmm.
it off all at once. It's an adage of, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. How do you lose your weight? 1 ounce and 1 pound at a time. So
Yeah.
people need to be patient. And usually I ask them, would you like to weigh 24 to 48 pounds lighter by this time next year? And people who need to lose weight will say, yeah, of course. Okay, well, if you can lose 2, 3, 4 pounds a month on average, not a week, a month. Most people say, I can do that. Well, if you do that consistently for 12 months, because some months you're going to lose more and some you'll lose less, after a year, you'll be 24 to 48 pounds lighter. However, we're all impatient. We want everything instant gratification. So that's where I teach people to, be patient and give the process time to work.
Yeah, personal growth is all about patience, isn't it? I mean, and I tell people personal growth is it's also we have personal growth is about the entire being. It's not just the inside and fixing and getting spiritual and all these things. You got to learn how to take care of your temple, the place that you're living in. How do you take care of it? It is just as important as it is the inside. I mean, the spiritual aspect of your personal development. It is one. It's the whole thing. When you love yourself, you gotta love your spirit and your body. You gotta learn to manage it and train your mind to respond to get out of depressions and all of the other things. Just the same way you have to train your mind to manage how you eat and why you're eating what you're doing and so forth. I used to carry, I would take like 10 almond nuts and I would have them on me and put it in my pocket. And as I'm walking through, because I manage people and so forth, and I'd have my water and stuff. And if there was any kind of, craving that I'm trying to process because of the pressure or whatever, I would take that one peanut or nut that I have in my pocket, and I just put it in my mouth, and I would chew it slowly as I'm processing where I'm dealing. Or at least I love the almond nuts. I take that more than the others, and I just chew on this and taking my time. It will bring me back, center me, and bring me present. And I was able to then deal with something from just this one, this one nut. And that's what I would do all through the day, Doc. And that one thing would give me enough. I don't know. For me, it gave me what I needed to move me through the next day, to bring me back present and to calm me down from going over the edge and stopping at the machine and putting in the coins and grabbing food that doesn't have any nutritional value at all to my body whatsoever. So, yeah, it's something you have to, it's the process of making the right decisions. That's the key to this thing. We tend to drift along, as you said, we're working and we're eating and we're not really paying attention. And a lot of people live like that. And personal development and what you're talking about, it's about being aware and living from a place of making decisions. Now, I want you to talk to me about how, as you began to train people about these things, because this is really important. These are stuff you had to learn on your own. Have you seen that doctor? Did you keep him or did you change doctor? How did that? Are you still having that relationship with him so that he could see what you have done?
Oh, yes. I still to the same doctor, the poster child loss and being healthy, and 3 books, Healthy Weight Loss and Working to Change the Dieting, is actually recommended and endorsed by Jack Canfield, co-author of Chicken Soup for the Souls. And what I used in that book was short stories
Yeah.
and fables and analogies, because people tend to learn through stories. And those stories had life lessons, and you can apply those life lessons to your eating habits and lifestyle. And people enjoy that because there's a story in there. There's many different stories, and all you need is one or two to resonate with someone to impact their life. So that's important for me. And the other thing is, I just got back from hiking Mount Kilimanjaro. So I felt really good because I did the 8J trek,
Congrats.
and I'm 67, and I got within 4 hours of the summit before altitude sickness got me. But I did finish all 8 days, and I was, very proud of the achievement. And so people use age as an excuse, and there's no excuse because it doesn't matter how old you are. Our bodies are incredible machines, and we don't look at our bodies as machines.
Hmm.
And the food is the fuel. And a lot of people take better care of their automobiles
Yeah.
by changing the oil and doing regular maintenance than they do their own bodies. And there's a quote by I believe it was either Dr. Bob Martin or Jim Rohn that says, well, if you wear out your body, where else are you going to live? And so people need to, like you said, view their bodies as a temple because, again, if you wear it, where else are you going to be for your spirit? So when people start changing their mindset as to putting fuel, which is food, into their body, then they approach it differently. A lot of times today, people eat food for socializing, for stress, for
Yeah,
comfort, emotional
yeah.
reasons. A lot of it is also convenience. Like you mentioned, it's easier to go
Hmm.
through the fast food drive-through. It's easier to pick up a bucket of fried chicken or order a pizza or get the frozen microwavable meal and throw it in the microwave. Very few people will take the time to go get the fresh ingredients and then take, the few minutes to prepare it. And it really doesn't take that much longer. And also, people are under the misconception that it's more expensive to eat healthier than it is to eat the fast foods. And that's a myth. It's actually cheaper to buy the fresh ingredients and eat healthier and take the time to prepare it than spend the money at the fast food places and the restaurants. And again, now you know what you're putting into your body, where if you're eating out a lot, you may not know what they're putting into the food. So that's one thing you have to look at the ingredients. The other thing is they give you the nutritional fact panels listings and people read it the wrong way. Most people look at the calories, the sugar, the fat content, the protein, the sodium, and those are in big letters and big print. Very few people read the very fine print, which is the ingredients, which is the most important
Hmm.
thing to see what you're actually eating. And what I tell people is
Yeah,
if you're not able to pronounce it, it's probably a chemical and probably not healthy.
yeah. They, I know, I've read some paperwork. They can pinpoint to the day when cancer began to manifest in the Western civilization population based on what we did. And a lot of it came out of the World War. They were in World War II where they're using a lot of canned foods and stuff like that to sustain the soldiers and all these different things. And then corporations took it and began to mass produce food for the population. And it's a shame. I grew up on a farm, so I know I love growing my own. When I lived in apartments and so forth, I still grew my plants. I grew tomatoes. I grew a bunch of other things. I had my onions and a ton of stuff I could tell people that you can have in an apartment. And all of my herbs and so forth was simply walking over to my stuff, cutting it, and preparing my meal. I just love to do that, the whole process. And as you said, it's if you know how to do it, it can be much more inexpensive than the cheap food. It's just you have to put in the will, if you will, into doing it, the wanting to do it. And most people are lazy in some fashion. Now, I think we are lazy. We've been programmed to be lazy about our health, and because everything is so easy, and the corporations give us 24-hour TV, all of these different things. One of the things I did in my life, my bedroom, no TV, no phone. The only thing that was there was a clock. I watched TV outside of the bedroom. When it was time for me to go down, I would go down. I remember when I was married to my wife. We were just new, and she would get in the bedroom and turn the light on, and I was like, nope. I don't go in there to read, because she was reading books. I'm like, no, I can't do that because I knew myself. I would go in there and that light is on. I'm up. I'm getting up again. So I told her, I said, I do all of that in the living room, in outside of the bedroom. The bedroom to me was the space where I came in to rejuvenate, rest. There was nothing electronic there, but it was a dark, nice, calm light so that we can rest. And so I had to train her on that and those were the best years of my sleep. And so it's very important. But how many of us do that today? I mean, because we're hooked up to that, to our electronics, So you have a lot of work to do, Doc. You're training people. Talk to me about some of those success story. I love the fact that you're using the small stories, or Jesus put it as parables, as they say. He took these nice little
Yeah.
stories. How is within that story with everything, the information that one can assimilate quickly and utilize. Talk to me about some of those stories that you have seen with your clients in educating them, and when the light goes on and they say, wow, I didn't know I can do that.
Oh, sure. One of my favorite ones is I call it the pot roast story, and there's different variations of it. I'm sure people have heard it. And if not, how it goes very simply is a lady's hosting a dinner party, and she makes a pot roast, and one of the guests says, "Can I get the recipe? This is delicious." And the host says, "Sure." She writes it down. The guest reads it over, and she goes, "Why do you cut the ends of the pot roast off?" And she goes, "I don't know. That's how my mother taught me." So she calls her mother the next day and she says, "Mom, why do we cut the ends of the pot roast off before we cook it?" And her mother said, "I'm not sure. That's how your grandmother taught me. Call your grandmother." So she called her grandmother and says, "Grandma, when we make the pot roast, you cut the ends off. Why do we do that?" And her grandmother thought for a minute. She says, "Oh, because when I was first married, the pot I had to cook the pot roast was too small, so I had to cut the ends off to make it fit." So the lesson of that story is we do things because that's how we were taught without thinking why. So I ask
Yeah.
people, why do you eat certain foods? When do you eat certain foods? How you eat certain foods? Because a lot of it is what I call dietary duplication. A friend of mine, John Canada, coined that term, and that's where you're taught by your parents on how to eat and what to eat, or you may have seen a colleague or a friend or someone that you mimic and you say, well, they're eating that way. I want to do that. And so you have to stop and think, well, why am I, eating a certain way or certain items or in a certain manner? And so when people stop to think about why they're doing certain things and write it down, it's like, oh, maybe I should change because I don't need to do it that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the stories. Another one is there's a couple stories about frogs. And the one
Mm-hmm.
story about the frog is, if you put a frog in a pot of tepid water and you gradually increase the heat, well, eventually it'll cook the frog without the frog realizing it. Unfortunately, today, our foods are very toxic and poisonous. However, we don't realize it because it's gradual. So it won't kill
Yeah.
you right away. However, after 15, 20, 30 years, that's when we start seeing the negative consequence. That's why if you're 50, there's an 80% probability you're either a type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic. And that means if you're a pre-diabetic, within 7 years, if you don't change your eating habits, you'll be a full type 2 diabetic. A lot of this is all reversible or preventable. And the other thing with the frog story is there's two frogs hopping through the woods and they fall into a deep pit. And the other frogs are looking down and their frogs are jumping as hard as they can, trying to get out. And the other frogs are saying, it's too deep, give up, you're done. And the one frog gives up and lays down and the other one keeps jumping and he's jumping and finally he gets out and the other frog's, how did you get out? We were telling you not to. And he says, oh, I'm deaf. I thought you were cheering me on. So again, it's your mental attitude and how you approach things. And that's a little story that, people can relate to. It's like, oh, if I don't listen to people with negative thoughts telling me I'm unable to do it or I shouldn't do it, maybe I can succeed and accomplish what I want to. So it's little
Mm-hmm.
things like that, little stories like that that are interwoven throughout the book that, people enjoy. And again,
Mm-hmm.
all you need is one or two stories to resonate with someone to make an impact on their life.
Talk to me, Doc, about culture, because culture and food and eating. Because I'm sure you will hear this, but this is how we eat. This is my culture. Talk to me as to how do you then educate someone like that? Because culture is strong. I mean, it's a powerful thing. As you mentioned, the reason behind the pot roast story, it is a generational thing that's passed down hundreds of years, depending on whatever culture you're a part of. So, how do you then take your knowledge and educate someone that is coming to you from that perspective?
Well, most cultures have similar eating habits and lifestyles. It's just different types of food. So I just
Mm-hmm.
look at what their cultures, the foods that they enjoy that are healthy for them, eat those. The culture that your foods are that are not healthy for you, well, let's
Mm-hmm.
either eliminate or substitute or reduce that amount. So I'm not saying you have to give up everything, just,
Yeah.
reduce the quantity. Um, it's hard to say because every culture is different, like you said. And some people believe you have to be a vegetarian. Well, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because Eskimos are healthy, and they don't have fresh fruits and vegetables. They have
Yeah.
adjusted their bodies based on what's available for them for food, which is the fuel for your
Hmm.
body. So there's little things that you can do like that. The other thing is there was a book I read by Andy Andrews called The Traveler's Gift that was life changing, and I highly recommend it. And it teaches you 7 different lessons in life, and one of them is to be responsible for yourself. Today, we blame everybody for our failures and our eating habits or being overweight or our medical condition. We look outside of ourselves to blame instead of looking inward and seeing what we can do to improve it. Everybody's looking for that magical pill or magical,
Yeah.
fruit or vegetable. And it doesn't exist. And
Yeah.
that's why, like you said, you have to put the effort in. And that's the difference. So when you learn to be accountable to yourself, and at the beginning you mentioned about being responsible, I call it a code of honor. And a lot of times
Hmm.
people don't have a code of honor. So in the book, I talk about having a code of honor as it relates to food and lifestyle. And it's
Yeah.
personal. And you make an agreement with yourself. And this is what you're going to do. One of the stories or chapters I talk about is cheeseburgers, wine, and wedding cake. And there's a valuable lesson in that. And the lesson is you're at a party and the host is cooking your favorite, hamburger, special grass-fed beef, and homemade buns and your favorite condiments and cheese, and he offers you one, and so you're on a restricted diet. What do you do? Well, most people would indulge and say, "Oh, that looks great. I'll treat myself." Well, in this case, you say, "No, thank you," because you're a vegetarian. You don't eat red meat. So it's not that you won't or can't.
Yeah.
You don't. The other thing is the host
Hmm.
also offers you your favorite wine. And you're thinking, well, most people would say, okay, I'll have a drink. Well, in this case, you're a female and you're pregnant. Well, pregnant women don't drink alcohol. Again, it's not that you won't or
Hmm.
can't, it's you don't. So it's a hard and fast rule. Also, if you're an alcoholic, you just don't drink because once you start, you don't stop. So I treat food as,
Yeah.
being addicted to it. So there's certain things I just won't touch because I know once I start, I won't stop. The other thing is you're at a wedding and they hired a baker to make this incredible cake, and everybody's oohing and eyeing, and they offer you a piece, and you say no, thank you, and they're looking at you. Well, the cake has nuts in it, and you have a severe allergy to nuts, and could be fatal if you ate the cake with the nuts in it. So again, it's not that you won't or you can't; it's you don't. It's a rule, and so you make certain rules with yourself, certain
Hmm.
agreements, and you do your best to stay within that because you know that's what you need to do for your own health and wellness and benefit. And that's where the problem comes is most people do not make agreements with themselves, or if they do, they don't keep them. So you need to think of yourself as an airplane and a pilot. Most airplanes today on autopilot, they're adjusting 90 to 95% of the time. So when it's off course, it
Yeah.
keeps getting back on course. Well, you don't have to be perfect. And if you get off course, you can just readjust. So just keep readjusting till you're getting the course correct. And that's what I advocate to people is don't beat yourself up. Just keep moving forward. And that's where a lot of people will say, well, I cheated on this day, so I'm just going to stop and give up. Or they don't see immediate results and they don't realize those small little changes that they're doing are having an impact. They don't give it enough time to see the noticeable results. So that's what I would advocate to people is uh, keep agreements with yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you don't maintain those agreements. Get back on track and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. It's as I said in the onset, life is a series of agreements that we make and how faithful we are to those. We have to learn to trust ourselves, to be honest to ourselves and be faithful to ourselves once we release those words. And I tell them, it first must become a statement of faith. And people always ask me, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, it means that you have to believe it more than anything else. And once you believe it, you will do the necessary things that will allow you to achieve what you've just said. And you use the analogy about the plane, and I do the same. I tell them a plane never flies straight. It never does. It cannot do it. And it makes the adjustment when you have the turbulence from wind and all the different things. And that is why that compass is there. That compass is there to bring them back. You don't hear the pilot cussing and swearing at himself because the plane went off course slightly. because of a little, turbulence, and the turbulence come in our life, but you don't cuss at yourself. You just take it and you make the adjustment, and your goal still remains the same. This is the destination that you want to get to, and then you begin to do your adjustment as the turbulence come, and give yourself space to say, you know what? Oh man, that tasted pretty good, but I need to get back on track. And it is okay. You're not clobbering yourself. The goal is still ahead, and there's a little turbulence, but you're not off course. Stay on course. Be honest with yourself. Be faithful to you. You've got to be faithful to you. Trust yourself. And so when you make those agreements that you will do it and you'll accomplish it, and stop beating up yourself, there's no need for it. It accomplished nothing but defeat. And so just stay on course, Doc. And I tell them that keep flying, man. Just keep flying. Just focus on your destination. I want to talk to you, Doc, about one thing that you had mentioned, about the when you were talking about the cultural aspect of it, and I loved that because I remember dealing with folks on that, and my dad was one person. My culture, they love eating pork, pigtail or whatever it was. I never could see it. I couldn't. Here is this heart attack guy. He was 60 something years. I had a heart attack. Asked me to take him shopping, and he is in this barrel sticking his hand with pigtail, and I took a picture. I had to take a picture. And because I'm like, Dad, they just told you that you're going to die of a heart attack, and you're in this bowl getting some fat to put some in some food because of the flavor. And so I had to teach him about substituting things. I told him, I said, I know he loved that flavor, that salty thing. So I told him, try smoked turkeys, something different. And it took us a little while to move him to that. But he was so, it was cultural, and it was programmed inside of him that this man had a heart attack, Doc, and he's sticking his hand in a barrel, pulling out pigtails. So I know some of the things that you are up against, and I want to tip my hat up to you because I know that you're there helping them to fly. Doc, I want to thank you for coming. Guys, you're listening to us on this podcast. I want you to get into his space, purchase the books, get off of that diet. That is a sprint. That is not what you're called to do on this life. We are not called to be sprinters, all of us. We are in this specific thing as far as personal growth is concerned. It is a marathon. It is until you die. You are growing. But that's the beautiful thing about you. You're learning more about yourself. And I want you to buy his books. Get everything you can so that you can learn how to manage your weight, because a lot of the sicknesses that some of you are dealing with is based on what you're eating. As he said earlier, we're poisoning ourselves slowly as we're eating all those hot dogs and all those other things for all those years, and they're now manifesting within our body. And he is going to teach you how to now begin to manage that, how to fly and self-correct. Doc, I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.